What's happening, everyone? Art at Patience Metal Fab, and I'm hanging out in the shop just checking in on the progress for this Group B rally car build. Now, in the last episode, you saw that we were stripping this whole thing down. We got as far as taking those over fenders off, and now we're at a point where we actually need to start cutting into this car, kind of undoing some of the damage that previous owners have done. A good example, as you can see, there's a couple of bolt holes up here, and the metal is kind of warped. Somebody in the 90s bolted in a cage to this and kind of screwed up this rear area. So we need to fix that, and that's why Ben's making some marks. We're going to be cutting this section out and basically remedying what the previous owner did. Now, once we finish that, we're going to be putting a permanent race cage in here. You can see Ben has already started some of the mounts on the corners of where it's going to go, and that's really what this episode is going to be all about, kind of showing you the process of building a cage start to finish for a purpose-built race car like this is going to become. Show you guys the step-by-step process and our mentality in this. So as I mentioned, it had an old cage from the 90s that was bolted in. So what they did was pretty much haphazardly drill into the strut towers, and Ben has been working on fixing that. So he's had to cut out this upper section, and then the lower section of the strut tower was also drilled through. It wasn't structural because essentially you had two thin metal pieces being sandwiched together, and that's what caused it to be warped. Now, the fix for that, because it does need to be a mount point for our cage, is to sort of fill that section. So what Ben has come up with is this. It's a plate that's going to be welded in, and then you have these offset spacers that will also be welded in, and on top of that, a plate to pretty much sandwich it all together, because the cage is going to be going off of those 2 points. Once he has all that in, we're going to have a rigid structure to work off of. As you can see, Ben did a really good job of closing these portions up, and now it's reinforced in the center. Now he's just got to grind this all flush. And in the meantime, Andrew's been working on the beginning stages of the cage. So you can see we're using new technology in an old car and actually utilizing lasers to get the exact center points of all of this so the cage is perfectly symmetrical. So Andrew, what's your next step in this, or the beginning of the cage? What are you doing?
So when I had to set up the laser, normally we can set the lasers so that it's at where the foot of the main hoop would land, but because we have these two pieces in the car, we cannot do that. So I set an arbitrary mark from some point in the car that's the same, then I can use that as my new main hoop foot datum point. And then I just mark some spots around and measure for clearance issues.
So just like the start of any cage, the main hoop is going to be the most integral point. You got to get that perfectly symmetrical, perfectly aligned, and the laser is allowing us to do that, along with some complicated for me math, easy for you math. As you've heard me talking about before, we digitally design all of our cages. So Andrew's got it in our computer system here. You see the main hoop right there, and then he's been designing all the bars around it. Now he's got to basically cut out the A-pillar bars, and there's going to be some tricky cuts to it. And Andrew, why is it a little bit different than the normal bar?
Because most of the time you can land a bar on just the rocker, but we're actually going to go down the rocker so it has a, instead of landing on top.
Which means we're gonna have a funky cut on our Bentec Dragon, so we can look forward to that. Check it out. We usually don't have to notch our tubes just like this, but in this case, Andrew's got the piece that's gonna fit into. There you go. So eventually we're gonna bend this bar and then get this all fitted up and weld it into place, and we're gonna have the A-pillars done on the Group B rally car. Quick Monday morning check-in for you guys on cage progress. This is sort of the point of the build where it starts slowing down just a little bit because there's so many intricate bends and fitment. You saw him cutting a couple of bars for the roof area, and otherwise the main hoop's in, obviously the A-pillars are in, and he also added some reinforcement to the rear. So it's really starting to come together. You see the big pieces in, and then we're gonna start doing some gusset work eventually. Andrew's gonna be working on the final fit and finish on those bars, and then eventually we're gonna need to design door bars before we can break all the tacks, pull all that stuff out, because that chassis is gonna have to go to blasting. And then eventually, once we get it back, it's all gonna come together. We're gonna put the cage back in and then do finishing welds all around so that it's permanent. Now, that means there's plenty of more episodes to come on that car. There's so much work left to do. We appreciate you guys tuning into the first few. I'm gonna add the first episode in the description so you can check it out if you're just joining us now. And we hope you come back for the follow-up episodes. Consider subscribing to our page and sharing this around with your friends. Thank you very much. We'll see you in the next one.